Welcome to Procreate Animation Crash Course. I'm so excited that you have tuned in to this short workshop, tutorial, whatever you want to call it. This is going live on YouTube right now, and perhaps if you're rewatching this later, I'm so excited, and so just wanted to say welcome. Now, before we get started, let's have a quick preview of what you can create in Procreate Animation. So here you go. This is a short example of my Pringles logo animation that I created, one of many, and this is exactly something that you can create in Procreate. So if you want to learn how to create this later, I'm going to tell you all about this. But for now, if you are interested in getting started, this is your first time and you didn't actually even know that Procreate has an animation feature, well, you're in the right place. Now, latest version of Procreate. This is going to be very essential to create something beautiful. Now, that being said, it's time to get creative and to look at the very first step at creating something really beautiful. So, step number one, let's go and let's have a look. So step number one, we want to create an animation canvas in Procreate. To do so, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into Procreate. Here, I've got a lot of different pieces around. I'm going to go here into a separate folder. No need for you to understand. So you just open Procreate and you go on the plus. Now you have a lot of different options that you can choose from, and one of the favorite ones that I like to use for animation, especially if I want to share them then later on social media, is screen size. Screen size is going to be different for everybody depending on the iPad that you use. I have a 12.9-inch iPad Pro with over 500 gigs because I need that storage right now. So if you're looking into getting the right iPad for animation, it's definitely going to be anything later than 2018 and one with an Apple Pen because you need that to draw. And of course, the bigger the screen, the easier it's going to be to draw anything on it. Now, I'm choosing the screen size, but usually, depending on the project that you're working for, you'll need to use some video format. So I also have those, but right now, as I mentioned, I'm going to go with screen size. It really doesn't matter what size you're working on. This is going to be great. So next up is first getting into the animation setting. So for that, you'll go onto the wrench, and then on the action tool, you'll go to canvas. So that's already selected. And then you have here a little toggle for animation assist. Turn this one on, and that will pop up the menu right here, down here, that you want to use to create beautiful animation. So right here, that's the whole thing that's going to pop up, and that's the one that we're going to work in the most. Now, here, everything what we're doing is, well, you can play. Well, we just have one frame. There's nothing really much we can do. We can add frames here. And what it actually does, it's not adding frames in here. It's actually creating new layers. So if I create here, add frame, it will create a fourth layer. Now, this is where it gets a little bit tricky. You can actually select two frames together, so just swipe right, and then you can group these, and suddenly it will create one frame. So how many groups in a group you have doesn't really matter. The outside group, this one here, is the most important. That's how many frames you have. So a little bit different than layers and frames. Just pull these two apart. Now, once we have that, what we can do is we can start drawing. So pick up any brush that you want. I like to use the Freestyle pack from Ian Barnard, and then I can start drawing just a circle. So next up, I'm just going to tap on the next square. It will jump right away onto the next layer. And what I can do here is I can either, like here, select the right layer. So because I have so many layers in here, I'm just going to delete that. Going to create a new layer and then just draw the next frame. As soon as I have that, I'll keep on drawing here, and then I can move this frame around or the circle around like this, and that will create a movement of a sphere that moves from the center outside to the right side. Now, I can toggle back and forth. So now is where it gets a little bit interesting. We've created a few frames, only 4 frames. Now, if I play this right away, you'll see this gonna get you a real headache. But what you don't want to do is you want to go in here, and that's where you have different settings. So this is the animation menu that you have. So you can either choose between loop, ping pong, and one shot. loop is it will go round and round. At the end, it will start from the beginning again, and it will go and turn around. A ping pong, as it says, it will go back and forth, so it will go to the last frame and then back to the first frame by going reverse. And of course, one shot, it will just go through the whole thing once and then be done. So that's going to be important to understand. I'm usually just in the loop. I'm never going to go to ping pong or one shot, but if you have like a bouncing ball that bounces infinitely or goes back and forth, has the same movement, that's not a bad option. Now, the next thing here that we have is frames per second. Like here I have selected 15, that's usually the standard, and I can move here back to 12. I wouldn't go below 12 unless, and there's the unless, is if I'm just trying to get an idea sorted. So for example, here we can just go to 4 frames, and now like everything moves slower because there's 4 frames in a second. So until it goes from one point to the other, it's just that, so it's taking a little bit longer. So here, ping pong back, it goes up and down, and that's how we do things. Now, let's play around with onion skin frames. So here you see the onion skin frames that you already have. So this actually shows me the frame that goes after and the frames that goes afterwards or beforehand. And then here you can also reduce the opacity. That helps you keep track about where things are moving. So now that we have already looked into this, this is kind of the start. So just a repetition, you go into the wrench tool, tap on Animation Assist, turn it on, and that's where you'll get into the animation settings. So if I turn this off, it will go back to normal. Every layer will be shown. If I turn Animation Assist, only one layer will appear visible. And the way to create like multiple things in one, so for example, here I can toggle these together, and then for example, I don't know, create like a second layer here. I can turn this off easily just by grouping these layers, and then finally everything down here, and that's where you have all the settings. So that being said, here is a little first thing to get to know. So the second thing here is getting to know Animation Assist. That was step number 2. And then step number 3 is going to create your first couple of frames. So if you're ready, why don't we jump in to Procreate and let's create a first little story. I already have one in mind. I have thought about this a little bit. I love telling stories. And so why don't we go out, and animation is a really great tool to tell stories. So let's go out, let's create a new one. And I like to tell you the story about, let's go here. So first off, we have a cliff, and then we have here a little ball, and that little ball will have to jump over this cliff. So right now, if I just do this, it will jump between the background and the foreground. Now I want to set this as a background. So you can tap on the very first layer. It has to be the first layer, and I'll tell you why. And you can tap on here background. On the last layer, what you can also do is tap on foreground, so you can have always something that is in the back and something that's always in the front. Those are just 2 things, but I don't want to turn this on. So right now, I have this ball, and this ball I kind of want to like to come out here and then to see like, oops, oh, there's a cliff, I don't want to do that. Goes back and then takes a lot of speed and then tries to jump over, but it just misses and then jumps back down. So here I'm just turning off the snapping and jumps back down, but then out of nowhere bounces back up. So bounces back up and then goes back up here. So right now, sounds like a crazy story, so much to do, but since we have a little element that's really easy to animate, that's what we're going to do. So let's do this. We're having a ball that comes in. So how do we do this? Well, we can duplicate this layer, and I'll go back here, and I'm just going to take this and then move that around. And so that's kind of like the speed it will go here. I need to make sure that the order is correct. Here, duplicate, going back to the very first one, and it just going out of the frame, and duplicate one more here, and it's almost out, and then just comes in. So here, boom, the first ball just comes down and then stops. So here, I'm just gonna let that ball stop, and then try to look over here, and then just watch out. Oops, it's almost out here, barely can save itself, and now goes back around. And so I'm creating these in between frames. And now it's like if we play that around, whoop, there we have, that's our first initial thing. And so the idea is always to move things around. So as you remember, I dragged that ball around to try to figure out where it's going. And so that's kind of like how it's going and moving around. Now, of course, this is no longer a ball. So what did I do? I kind of shaped it in a different way and made it a little bit transform and seeing and trying to make that work really well. So this is kind of like the first part of the story. So now it's going back to normal. And I can duplicate that around. I can also redraw it every time. And so it takes up speed. So it's a little bit slower here. Takes up speed, goes faster. And now you see here, there's a little blur of all these different layers. So I can go in here and then reduce the onion skin frames to just a couple because I don't want to see all of them. So here I just keep on going, duplicate, and then it just really speeds out. And out. Now, this is the thing here. I wanted to kind of like take its time before it speeds back in. So here I'm just going to add a duration of a couple frames. So we see the ball leave. We don't know where it went. And then we're kind of like making it really fast and to really speed out here. So add a frame. And here it goes super fast, lightning fast. And then there it just stops and then tries to jump and lifts off. Always need to make those sound effects because that makes everything better. And then here you'll see the ball kind of like losing speed, gets rounder again, and then realizes, oh no, it's stuck here, and then falls down, speeds up again. And so that's kind of like how we make this fall. And so right now, it's just really a quick animation, just a shape going down. So let's have a look, and I always like to do this, going back and forth, seeing that ball, whoop, and then jumping down. And now you see this kind of like a comic style effect of it going back and forth is all in here. And so right now it's done, it's gone. And here we're just going to add a couple of frames like here, 3, 2, maybe 5. And then at the end, we're just going to add a new frame. And that's kind of like where out of nowhere, it jumps back up. Maybe a little bit longer like this. And then here it bounces. And it regains its shape, barely makes it, and then rolls out just a little bit. And then kind of like maybe size of relief here, just gonna redraw a couple of frames here, and then just rolls out. So that's kind of our story. Short and sweet. And so let's have one here, and we can play that back and forth. So now jumps back up, and then rolls around. And so that's kind of like the short story, and now that's where we start running around with the timing, figuring out like all these different details, where it's too fast, where it's too slow, but that's really how you create your very first short animation. Now, you can of course do this with a lot of different things. You can have, for example, let's try something else quickly. For example, you write hello. And you can also do this with erasing. So for example, here, I just have hello. We're just talking about creating a quick animation here, back on, turning the toggle assist, duplicating this here, and then I start to kind of like erase some parts out, duplicate this again, and then erase some more, duplicate here, and then keep on erasing more all the way. Let's do some really quick erasing. Always make sure you erase enough. So here, for example, I want to reduce the opacity, and here as well. So here I can see that I didn't erase everything super well, so duplicate that. That's perfect. Duplicate, and gonna erase that. And so it's a very repetitive process. that's absolutely need to know. It doesn't really do itself, so here you can just keep on erasing. Here I might just reduce a little bit that brush. And then duplicate again. And so you can see it starts to disappear. And of course, once you start really getting into it and how to apply a lot of great techniques and a lot of cool tips and stuff like that, you can really create these awesome animations that will blow people's minds and create like really intricate pieces. I have never seen quite the reaction on all of my Instagram pieces so far. So I've never grown as fast on Instagram as I have right now, and all to this new thing called animation. And so here, add a new frame, and then now if I play this back, it just disappears and vanishes. Now you can do the opposite way around, so kind of like starting from back here, duplicating, and then start to erasing from the back end, and do this whole thing over again. So that's kind of what we look into the next step, where it's like really play and refine. Always my very first pieces that I create are very rough and very difficult, or kind of like just an idea that I put out. And then I start playing around, refining these pieces. For example, right now, this is an inside look and of a piece that I'm working on. I'm by far finished, but you're getting a first glimpse like my students are. So here, for example, I have this screen, and I'm trying to get like all these frames together. So if you look at here, I have a lot of different pieces that I can move around, that I have more agility over. And so that's kind of like where you go into when you start to really play around with these effects and creating like mind-blowing pieces. So if I play this around here, you see whoop, whoop, and then there's the logo coming down, then there's a laptop going closing, and then coming down with the iPhone and the iMac that comes behind it. And so I need to kind of like adjust all these different pieces, but that's kind of the thing that I create to make all of these things come together. So these are the different projects that I'm working on, but just to give you a little idea of what is going on. So finally, the last stage of creating a beautiful piece, and that's to kind of like wrap up the crash course, is of course step number 5, exporting and sharing your piece. Now before I get into this, I also want to show you kind of like here. So if we go back in here, we have this whole final piece here. Let's say this is the final piece. I like the speed, I like the tempo, I like all these elements. It goes around, jumps down, goes back up, and then drifts off. Actually overcame this little cliff. And so all I have to do here is going to share, and then I have different options: animated GIF, animated PNG, MP4, and HEVC. So these 4 options are meant for animations. Now the 2 most common ones are animated GIFs and or GIFs, if you are, depending on what side you are on, what camp you are. Animated MP4s, those 2 are the most used. So animated GIFs are great because you can also save a transparent background, so that's great for stickers, something like that. And then videos, animated videos are also great. So I usually export in 2 ways, and then once you go in there, you get this option. You have the max resolution. You can really change again the frames per second as you did in the project. It will usually take the frames per second that you had in the project. And then you have a different couple of options that you can look at. But the 2 most main features here are max resolution. That's the resolution that you created your piece. And then also the web piece. So that kind of like reduces the quality just so you can save a piece for a beautiful design on the web. And you can see already this here, the quality just dramatically lowered, and then export that. And then of course you can then save that to someone else or share it with somebody else. So those are the ways how you can export your work. Now, That's how you start animation and start animating. But how to create animations like this? Well, that's the right question to ask yourself. So this piece is a logo animation I created for Mercedes. It's not an official deal that I've created for them, but it's just something that I wanted to try out and learn. And so you see there's a lot of elements going around. Now, of course, with what I've just taught you, this is just the beginning. What I have to offer you is actually a beautiful 6-week bootcamp, because right now this is the launch of the Procreate Animation Made Simple Bootcamp, and what you're gonna get is 6 awesome live sessions over Zoom plus recordings, and in those individual sessions you will learn, number one, the basics of animation. So just what we did right now, right here, this is something that I'm going to share you more in depth, really going through all these different parts, how you can create more layers, how you can group layers, all of that and even more, so much more. Then in the session number 2, I'm going to show you a couple of different ways to make things appear and disappear. For example, this is one way, this is another way, how you can write something up and make things disappear in a beautiful way. In session number 3, we're going to look at transitions and morphs, how to go from one word to another and really go around that. Then finally, we have this beautiful morphing in here as well. So there are different techniques, a lot of different ways to do that, and that's kind of what I'm going to show you. In session number 4, I'm going to show you how to create or start a process of animation, how you create a beautiful storyboard, come up with an idea, start planning to creating your animation, and then finally executing it so that you can create something like this from an idea, from just an idea that comes into your mind to the final product. That's also when we're going to start creating your first animation, so you'll get to work on your own project, and this is going to be really exciting because you can then also create your own class project during this time, and that's kind of what we're going to start in session number 4. Then in session number 5, we're going to look at advanced animation techniques. For example, how to introduce like these photos, what technique I've used to introduce this beautiful G-Wagon, and kind of like creating these awesome effects that come into it as well. And then finally, that also actually is the moment when we're going to look over your first projects, kind of like giving you feedback on the idea, where you can exchange with other class students and really get a good sense of what you want to create. And then finally, in session number 6, this is where we're going to look at exporting and sharing to social media, not just how you can share your projects, like export a video, but also then how you can record, how you can share it on social media to get those views, like crushing your views, getting the attention from brands. For example, here you see Mercedes, Spotify, YouTube, Magnum, and on running, like just a couple of those brands that have reached out and also noticed the videos that I've created. That is all good and done because you get all your session recordings available the next day, and you have lifetime access. Plus, you also get a beautiful access to private group chats with exclusive insights to my process and projects, because I'm going to be sharing kind of like the video that I just showed you before. Like, I'm going to share those on that group chat, giving you kind of like the insights of a project that is up and coming that I'm going to be posting. And this is just a little part of all you're gonna get from the 6-week bootcamp. So you're going to learn how to start using Procreate, an animation tool. You're going to start understanding how to create these different animations, like making things appear, change around, and then creating a loopable GIF, plus how to plan and process, like create your own masterpiece. And we're going to look at some advanced animation techniques, plus how to share your work to really get those likes, and all that you'll end up with your own piece, just like I showed you before.